With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yoma Daf Ayin Gimel. This is the last daf from Perek Shvi'i Boloi Kohen Gadol. We learned in the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Beis that the Kohen Gadol has to be dressed in the Shmoyne Begadim when he is consulted for the Urim V'Tumim. And we began at the end of Ayin Beis Amid Beis a sugya that Rav Dimi says, and l'chura, this is in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, as we'll see today, that the Kohen Mashuach Milchama, he, when he serves in the Beis HaMikdash, he also has to wear the Shmoyne Begadim. He's taken not a Kohen Gadol, but being that he is a Kohen Mashuach Milchama, as he quoted the pasuk, that even the Kohen that's Acharov, that's on one step lower than the Kohen Gadol, and that will be the Kohen Mashuach Milchama, needs to wear the Shmoyne Begadim when he serves in the Beis HaMikdash. We're going to challenge Rav Dimi. We're going to quote a lengthy braisa that delineates all of the differences between the Kohen Hedyot and the Kohen Mashuach Milchama and the Kohen Gadol. We will challenge the Shita of Rav Dimi. We're going to bring Ravin, as is the norm, that when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, he had another version of what Rabbi Yochanan said, and that is that not that the Kohen Mashuach Milchama, when he does the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, wears the Shmoyne Begadim. But what Rabbi Yochanan said is that the Kohen Mashuach Milchama can also be consulted for the Urim V'Tumim. He can be the one to whom the questions are asked, and while that happens, he obviously must wear the Shmoyne Begadim, because the question is being consulted from the Urim V'Tumim. That will clarify more today, and that is inserted, at least according to most of the Rishonim, inside the Choshen. So it's not only that the Kohen Mashuach Milchama can be the one asking the question, he can be the person to whom we're consulting. And while that's happening, he wears the Shmoyne Begadim.
Is it one set or two sets?
Oh, so therefore it comes out that there were many sets of the Shmoyne Begadim. As we'll speak at least a little bit more, we just learned recently that you can't leave the temple complex with the big day Kohen Gadol. And the Shimon HaTzadik, it was a one-time thing, or it was only Begadim that was never used yet.
Only one.
So here you see clearly that there were more than one set of the Shmoyne Begadim. And therefore there was more than one Urim V'Tumim according to many Rishonim. We'll speak more about this when we get there. Okay, we're going to speak about how the procedure of this consultation worked. This is the main sugya, even though it's mentioned in other places. And how the predictions of the Urim V'Tumim always came true, even more than prophecy from a Navi. Even though the Rambam, when he speaks about it in the beginning, you say the HaTorah, that how do we know whether someone is a Navi or not? Only if all of their predictions come true. But we also know that if the prediction of a Navi is for something in the negative, to speak clearly, like Yoma, and then if the people did tshuva, which they did in Ninveh, then the prophecy does not come true. Masha Enkin, by anything that comes through the Urim V'Tumim, will always manifest, whether it is what we call positive, or whether what we call negative, it's always going to happen. And God willing, if we'll have time, we will start the 8th chapter. The final chapter of Masechta speaks about the halachas of Yom Kippur that are relevant in all times and in all places, and they are about the 5 inuyim. The Torah, interestingly, never writes explicitly, "Thou shalt not eat on Yom Kippur." The Torah does write 5 times the words that one should afflict oneself, ta'anu es nafshei seichem, or some other very similar expressions. And Chazal understand that the 5 inuyim refer to, as we'll see, the not eating and drinking, etc. We'll speak out very important machlokes rishonim, whether only eating and drinking is prohibited biblically, chiyuv kares, and the other 4 inuyim are midrabanan, or whether we're going to follow the many other Rishonim that say that all of the 5 inuyim are midoiraisa, even though God did not describe how we should afflict ourselves. But masru la chachamim, and when the chachamim make that definition, they are not making a rabbinic law, they are defining the din Torah, and they can make exceptions, and all of that will be exceptions in dinei Torah. Like we'll see, a melech and a kala can wash their faces, even if you're going to hold that rechitza is an isur doiraisa. And we're going to start the big shas sugya of chatzi shiur, machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan holds chatzi shiur is asur min haTorah. Reish Lakish holds that chatzi shiur is muter min haTorah. We'll explain what that means and how that's applied, and much, much more. Let us start where we left off. We left off 2 lines in the bottom of Ayin Beis Amid Beis. Again, Rav Dimi says that the Kohen that had that awesome job of inspiring the troops prior to war, he was called the Kohen that was anointed to lead us into battle. When he serves in the Beis HaMikdash, he's already higher than the Kohen Hedyot. Even though he's not a Kohen Gadol, yet he wears the Shmoyne Begadim if and when he does the Avodah. Against this opinion, against Rav Dimi. Now, again, it's interesting that it doesn't say Omar Rav Dimi, Omar Rabbi Yechanan. But as we'll see, Bachlal, Rav Dimi came teaching us that which Rabbi Yechanan taught. That Rav Amri la Kidi, now again we have this machlekes, whether Kidi is the name of a Chacham, or Kidi means that this question was recorded without a name. That means the Chevra asked, or we don't remember who asked, but this was the kash. That it says in a Braisa, Yachol Yehei B'noi Shel Meshuach Mulchama Mishamash Tachtov, that lest one think that the son of the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama, if he's worthy, should automatically be appointed as the new Kohen Meshuach Mulchama. We find something very interesting when it comes to Malchus, when it comes to Kahuna Gedoyla. We learned this in Yoma. And we learned this in Shkalim also, when we spoke about the Shaman HaMishcha, when it's used, when it's not used, that there is a concept of Yerusha in positions of leadership. Now, it's not that the child will always yashin the position of the father. The child has to be worthy defined by Yirah Shamayim, even when there are other people that compared to the child are more worthy than the child. But since the child is ben the prior Kohen Gadol, or the child is ben the prior melech, it goes down b'Yerusha. And we're going to focus on Dinei Kahuna Gedoyla, and that's the way it works with Kahuna Gedoyla. Now, who's going to determine whether they're worthy or not? The Sanhedrin, that's a Gavaldik topic. How do they determine that? But that's the rule. So the Braisa says, if you would think that just like a Kohen Gadol's position does go down b'Yerusha if the child is worthy, the same will happen with the child of the Meshuach Mulchama when he passes away. The worthy child automatically becomes appointed. Kiderech shebenoi shel Kohen Gadol mishamash tachtov, says the Braisa Daf Ayin Gimel. No, it's not that way. That's why Talmud Loimer, it says in Parshas Tetzaveh when we're speaking about the Shivas Yemei Hamaluyim, that Shivas Yomim Yolbashem HaKoyen Tachtov Mibanov Asher V'Yol Oyel Moyed. Now, just to say the pasuk before this, after we speak about how we inaugurated the Kohanim, part of it was that they needed to do Milui Yodayim, Male Yadav, which means wearing the big day kahuna, or by the Kohen Gadol, the big day kahuna gedoyla. So it says in the pasuk that o big day hakodesh asher la'aroin yil abanov, acharov, etc. Now the pasuk prior to the one we're quoting is speaking about what happens after the passing of Aaron HaKohen. That even the following Kohanim, we learned to Sugyam, that one of the Lachatchila Dinim is that for 7 days they have to undergo the wearing of the Begadim. Shivas Yomim Yolbashem HaKoyin Tachdim Ibadav Asher Yova Yolol Moed. Now, Asher Yova Yolol Moed, just to know the Pshat, all of this, the Pshat is referring to the son. That the son should wear the Begadim for 7 days. However, the Gemara, the Brais is going to do a drasha. And the drasha, it says that Asher Yavai El Oyel Moyed is not, or at least not only referring to the son. It's clarifying the father. And this is Merames, when is there a Yerusha from the father to the son? Only if the father is Yavai El Oyel Moyed. Meaning, Misharoy Yavai El Oyel Moyed. And L'choira, that's only the Kohen Gadol. Because only the Kohen Gadol wears the Shmoyne Begadim. If you don't wear the Shmoyne Begadim, right, when it says Bezois Yavai Aran Ala Kodesh, even though, ironically, when you enter the Holy of Holies, you don't wear the Shmoyne Begadim. But the one who normally wears the Shmoyne Begadim, he's the one that can enter the Holy of Holies. So that's the remez, that since the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama can never enter the Kodesh Kachim, because he never wears the Shmoyne Begadim, one is connected to the other, that's the Braisa. So only the Kahuna Gedoyla passes down to the child, but not the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama. Now, it doesn't say in the Torah that the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama can never enter the Holy of Holies. It doesn't say that. And we are making a correct assumption that who is worthy to enter the Kodesh HaKachim with all the other conditions. You have to bring the pot, you have to bring the soyer, bezois yavai, only the one who wears the Shmoyne Begadim. Now, V'im Isa, if Rav Dimi is correct, that the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama, if and when he does the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, he wears the Shmoyne Begadim, so Mechsei Chazi, then he is also allowed and fit to go into the Holy of Holies. If I'm not mistaken, it's Shitas Hagra or other Achreinim that hold that really you can go into the Kodesh HaKodshim any day in the year, as long as you follow all of the steps of the Avodah of Yom Kippur. Not the fasting, all of the steps that we're learning about over here. Having the pot, having the soid, having the goydel, the ganze mais. But one thing is for sure, that the entry to the Kodesh HaKodshim is contingent on one's being allowed to wear the Shmoyne Begadim. So how can the Braisa exclude the Benoi of the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama from Yerusha if his father can enter? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Hachi Ka'amar. No, I'll tell you how to read the Braisa. Kol she'ikir mishichasei la'oyel mayit. The Kohen Meshuach Mulchama wears a Shmoyne Begadim when he does the Avodah. And yes, theoretically, he's allowed to enter the Holy of Holies with all of the other steps that we find in Achrei Mos. What the Braisa means to say is that when do we say that Shivas Yomim Yilbashim HaKohen Tachtov, and it goes down B'Yerusha, only if he's the son of a father who was anointed primarily in order to enter the Oyel Moed. Kohen Meshuach Mulchama is Taka Meshuach. When we had access to the Shemen HaMishcha, he was also anointed, but he was anointed Be'ikir to be the one leading us into battle. And therefore he is excluded. He was not Meshuach Be'ikir primarily, but still we stand with Rav Dimi that if and when he does the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, yes, he wears the Shmoyne Begadim. Not good. Frekte Gemara Meisvei. Another Brais. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shar kol yom v'dvarim. Mashuach Milchama Einoi Mishamish Loi Ba'arbab. He cannot serve in the Beis HaMikdash wearing the four like a Kohen Hedyot. He cannot serve in the Beis HaMikdash with the Shmoyne Begadim like a Kohen Gadol. And therefore, he can never do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. Oy Gewalt. Now, clearly, he does not wear the Shmoyne Begadim. That's a Braisa against Rav Dimi. That should refute Rav Dimi. Amalei Abaya, this whole Braisa has to be understood. Because let's put aside Rav Dimi for a moment. What is the Braisa saying? That the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama Elazar Mashvis Lei? Are you rendering him like a non-Kohen? Like, how can that be? It certainly cannot be that way midoiraisa. It cannot be that way midoiraisa. It must mean it's a derabanan. Elo, really midoiraisa, he would wear the Shmoyne Begadim. Rav Dimi is right. The Braisa, the Tanach saying, we had this above. Remember when we spoke about the replacement of the Kohen Gadol, going back to the first Perek, that the Kohen Gadol became Tamei. So therefore he was, the backup Kohen Gadol was used. But the moment the tomb of the Kohen Gadol goes away, he's reinstated. What happens to that backup Kohen Gadol? The one that was Meshamash, a little bit like a Kohen Gadol. So we had the Shita already above. That he's also in that limbo position. He can't go to where the Arba Begadim, Mailam HaKodesh Shalom Meridin. He can't wear the Shmoyne Begadim Midrabanan because of Eva, lest there'll be an animosity, enmity between the Kohen Gadol and someone who looks like he's competing with him. So that's the pshat of this Braisa. He can't wear the Shmoyne Begadim because of Eva, and this is only Midrabanan. He can't wear the Kohen Hedyot because of Mailam HaKodesh Shalom Meridin. Now, I want to make something clear over here. What exactly is the Mailam HaKodesh Shalom Meridin? The example that I just gave, was about the Kohen who was Taka Meshamish once with the Shmoyne Begadim. He cannot go back to the Arba Begadim. What about this Kohen Meshuach Mulchama? How exactly is it Mailam HaKodesh Shalom Meridin? So we'll see later. First of all, step number one is the fact that biblically he's worthy to wear the Shmoyne Begadim, according to Rav Dimi. So that on its own means he had an Aliyah, even though he never wore it. But then, as we'll see later, that independent of this Rav Dimi and later Ravin, whether he does wear the Shmoyne Begadim in the Beis HaMikdash or not, the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama is someone from whom we could consult with the Urim V'Tumim. Not on the Beis HaMikdash, out in the field. B'shas HaMulchama, again, this is the big topic of Rishonim, whether they could wear those Begadim or not. But if we're going to follow that they could, then he actually wore it when he was consulted. And then, Mailam HaKodesh Shalom Meridin. Okay. Listen, you can explain that the Braisa that we just read doesn't contradict Rav Dimi it's only to be understood on a level of Eva. On a rabbinic level, he may not wear the Shmonim Begadim. But I'm going to still have a problem, because I know of another Braisa, the following Tana, clearly does not subscribe to Eva, as we'll see in a moment. Yet the following Tana also, V'loi Kamashamish, we see that the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama, it's written clearly, does not serve in the Beis HaMikdash with the Shmonim Begadim. So you can't tell me that the Tana only meant on a rabbinic level. What is the Braisa? The Tanya. And this is the Braisa that delineates all of the differences between a Kohen Hedyot and a Kohen Gadol. And we will also mention here the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama. Says the Braisa, Dvarim Shebein Kohen Gadol le Kohen Hedyot. Number one, Rashi omits the first three words, as does the Gra on the bottom over here. That we're going to begin with the Par Haba Al Kol HaMitzvos. That's the chatos that we read about in the beginning of Vayikra, that, the Torah differentiates between the chatos of a nasi, asher nasi yechta. We also have the kohen Moshuach, kohen Moshiach, which means the kohen gadol. That normally when a yid violates a sin for which b'mezid there is kadis, you have to bring a carbon chatos. The carbon chatos is dafka female animal. If the Kohen Gadol, and this is only if he is learned, and he, because of his mistaken learning, concluded that a certain activity is permitted when it's prohibited, and that is an activity for which you're taka chayiv kadis if one would have done it b'mezid, so he also brings a chatos, but it's not a female animal, it's a bull. That's the par al kol ha-mitzvahs. So it's different than the average Kohen Hedyot that brings a Kohen Chata, a carbon Chatas like any other Yid. Also the part of Yom Kippur, that which we are learning about in this Masechta. The daily Asiri So'efa, right? We call that the Chavite Kohen Gadol, only brought by the Kohen Gadol. Now, there's a Minchas Chinuch that's brought on the first day that a Kohen Hedyot passed the inspection of the Sanhedrin, but that's not a daily thing. Loi Poireya, the second to last narrow line, the Kohen Gadol does not leave his hair unshorn. He doesn't grow long hair when he's in mourning. V'loi poireim, he doesn't rent his garment, kriya, the regular way. Even though the Braisa says he does rent his garments, avol poireim hu milamata. He rips it at the hem, and everyone else, including a Kohen Hedyot, rips it more on the top of the garment, as we'll learn more details in Moyed Katan. V'ha-hedyot milmayla. Furthermore, v'eina matama l'kreivav. Even though the Torah writes explicitly in Emoir that a Kohen Hedyot, during the passing of one of his close relatives, lo yitama, mitzvah, to impurify. The Kohen Gadol may never become tamei b'tumas meis, even during a burial, even of his father and his mother, etc. And first wide line, the Kohen Gadol is mitzuva al psula, the mitzvahs from to marry a woman that was never with another man. Umuzad al ho almana, he may not marry a woman that's a widow, even though she's not a divorcee, but still he may not marry her. Another din is umachzid es haroitzeach. It is through the death of the Kohen Gadol that someone who went into golus because he manslaughtered, ritzicha b'shoigek, he goes out free by the death of the Kohen Gadol, not by the death of a Kohen Hedyot. Umakriv oinan, even when he's in a state of aninus, he's allowed to offer korbanos. That's unique to a Kohen Gadol, but ve'ena oichel. Now that was the whole exception in Parsha Shmini, that there they were told to eat not the lodoiris korban, the daily unique korban. But normally even the Kohen Gadol cannot eat. And ve'ena oichel, even after the state of Aninus passes, he won't take part of any carbon that was brought while he was in a state of Aninus, even though now it passed. Let's say if we're going to hold that Aninus only goes until night, or you have a carbon shlamim, or whatever it is, that could be eaten for 2 days, and now he's out of the Aninus, he doesn't take part of that. B'chlal v'noitel chelik b'roish, he always gets to choose what part he wants. He's not subject to the regular division, and not only when it comes to consumption, but even when it comes to doing the avodah. Umakriv chelik b'roish, he gets to pick. There's a pious, but he gets to say, I want to do this, I want to do that. Umeshamish b'shmoine kelim, Kohen Gadol, where's the shmoine megadim? Upater al tumas migdash u'kedashav, that carbon oil v'yored. The 3 cases, one of them is when there was yediyah, Helam and Yediyah by Tumas Migdash Kadashav, for which someone then has to bring a carbon oil of a yored. The Kohen Gadol is not subject to that at all. Weiter, v'chol avodas Yom Kippurim eino kisheres elaboy. Chol avodas Yom Kippurim eino kisheres. That's our Masechta elaboy. And furthermore, says the Baraisa that this is true not only by a Kohen Gadol that was anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha, but even after Yoshio's hiding of it. Goynes, he was Goynes it, together with the Aron HaKodesh. So how did we upgrade a Kohen to a Kohen Gadol? Through simply wearing the 8 begadim. V'kulam le'yhagas memenu b'begadim. He has the same level of Kedusha, but our exceptions, chutz, mipar harba kol ha-mitzvahs. That Kohen Gadol will bring a normal chatas. Why? Because the Torah calls that carbon Kohen par Moshiach. He was not Moshuach b'Shemen HaMishcha. Furthermore, now that's what's neged to Rav Dimi. V'kulam le'hagois b'Moshuach she'avar. Wow. That if you have, that's not Moshuach Molchama. The substitute Kohen Gadol. The substitute Kohen Gadol was the topic of the first Perek. That we would have for Yom Kippur a backup Kohen Gadol, and sometimes the Kohen Gadol, right, Yishmael ben Kimchis, Taka, all of his 6 of his brothers, she saw 7 of her children. They were mashamish only for that Yom Kippur. But once you were upgraded, you have the same status, chutz, mi pari Yom Kippurim, because pari Yom Kippurim is only brought to one on Yom Kippur. Only one Kohen Gadol can serve on a Yom Kippur. And Vasidi So'efa, the daily Minchas Chavitim, is only brought by the current Kohen Gadol. V'kulam ein noyhagois b'Meshuach Molchama. The Meshuach Molchama is not included in any of the above. However, chutz michamisha devarim amurim b'parsha. What's the chamisha devarim? You'll see, it's not wearing the 8 begadim. It's he also loy poireya when he's in mourning. V'loy poireim, as we explained. V'loy metama l'kreivav. He also mitzvah lapsula umuzar alu almana. That's 5. And now there is a 6th that's subject to a machloikas. Do we say that when the Meshuach Molchama passes away, the Ritzeach gets to go back home? That's a machloikas, yes, according to Rabbi Yehuda, and the Chachamim oimrim eino machzir. Now, what do we clearly see over here? That this Braisa was speaking about the retired Kohen Gadol. This Braisa holds that the retired Kohen Gadol does wear the Shmonim Begadim. That was not one of the exclusions the Braisa gave. Eva, this Braisa doesn't hold of Eva. The current Kohen Gadol won't have any animosity. Yet this Braisa clearly holds that the Kohen Meshuach Molchama does not wear the Shmonim Begadim. He's only in these 5 or 6 devarim similar to the Kohen Gadol. So clearly we don't subscribe to Eva, this Braisa, and this Braisa clearly holds that the Kohen Meshuach Molchama, if and when he does avoid in the Beis HaMikdash, does not wear the Shmonim Begadim. Kasha and Avdimi answers the Gemara. Still, we're not going to refute Avdimi. Because when does this Tana not subscribe to Eva, which it doesn't? That's only when there was a Kohen Gadol that's retired. He once served. Now, the original Kohen Gadol went back. So this Braisa holds that the current Kohen Gadol won't feel any animosity if the one that was his substitute will wear the Shmonim Begadim. You know why? Because he knows that Kohen Gadol Taka did Avodah on Yom Kippur. He's like his equal. You know, you don't have animosity when you acknowledge that the other is also worthy. The Kohen Meshuach Molchama never does the Avodah Yom Kippur. So here there will be Eva. Why are you dressed like me when you're not on the same level? Ki leislei Eva answers the Gemara's only this Braisa b'dachavasei, but b'dezuter minei. Kohen Meshuach Molchama is certainly on a lower level. Even this Tana will subscribe to Eva, and therefore Rav Dimi stands. Rav Dimi says that mido oiraisa, he should wear the Shmonim Begadim, but then at a certain point Chazal made a Gzeira Eva, which is very difficult because that means that from then onwards he may never do the Avoid at all. He can't do it be'arba begadim because of Ma'alam HaKodesh V'lo Moridin, nor can he do it now with the Shmonim Begadim. Atkan. So Rav Dimi stands. Says the Gemara, Yosef Rab Abohu. He repeated this statement of Rav Dimi, but he repeated it correctly in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. So listen, there's Rav Dimi saying something, and if you don't agree with Rav Dimi, that's one thing. But when you hear Rav Dimi quoting Rabbi Yechanan, and you hold this not to be correct, you get frustrated. Rabbi Yechanan never could have said it. And indeed, Ahadrinu Rab Ami v'Rab Asi la Payu, when they heard Rab Abo saying it, the name of B'Shem Rav Dimi, B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, or whether they completely circumvented Rav Dimi, they just quoted Rabbi Yechanan, they turned their faces away. That means that they disapproved. But the way they disapproved was not by telling Rabbi Bo, you're wrong. They had the recheretz to him. But they wanted everyone to see that turning it away means not that they disagreed with Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan never would have said such a thing. Now there was another version, Ikad Amri, that it was Rab Chia bar Abba that said it in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. And again, Rav Ami and Rav Asi turned their faces away, and the Gemara says that the latter version is incorrect. Maskav Rav Papa Bishloime, if it was Rabbi Bohu saying it in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, or in the name of Rav Dimi, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, and Rav Ami and Rav Asi turned their faces away, why didn't they tell Rabbi Bohu straight, you're wrong? Meaning, Rabbi Yechanan never said it. Bishum Yekara de Bekeisar. We have this in Chagiga, Yudalid, and in other places, that Rabbi Bo was held in very high esteem in the governmental circles. And therefore, you're machabed him. You're not going to right away contradict him explicitly. You just turn your face away. But if the second version is correct, that it was Rab Chia bar Abba that said it in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, and Rav Ami and Avasi hold that Rabbi Yechanan never said that, Nemrulei Meimar, they should have told him clearly that Lei Amar Rabbi Yechanan Hachi. So therefore, it must be that it was Rabbi Abohu that said it in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Okay, and now Ki Asa Ravin, this is the rule. Whenever Rav Dimi comes in the Gemara, be sure or almost certain that a couple of lines later, Ravin is coming with a different report. And he said, that Rabbi Yechanan said a complete different thing. Rabbi Yechanan never said that the Kohen Meshuach Melchama should wear the Shmoinim Begadim. He didn't address that at all. Whether he can't wear it biblically or whether he can't wear it because of Eva. No. Nishal Itmar. All he said is that aside of the Kohen Meshuach Melchama, like we'll see clearly on Amud Beis, he can be the one asking the question. After all, he's in charge of the battle. But on top of that, there's another part of the Kohen Meshuach Melchama's function. He can be the person to whom questions are asked. And all that Rabbi Yechanan said is that yes, he can be asked, which automatically means while he is being consulted, he, the Meshuach Melchama, not in the Beis HaMikdash, out somewhere, or in the Beis HaMikdash, not for Avodah, he will wear the Shmoinim Begadim. Because the Urim V'Tumim is part of the Shmoinim Begadim. And now let's just take a quick pause and just mention the following. There's a big machlokes Rishonim. What is the Urim V'Tumim? Right, Rashi here, Yoma Ayin Gimel holds, the Urim V'Tumim is, like we mentioned, are two pieces of parchment that had on them Shemois of God Almighty, including the Shem Ab, and they were inserted in the fold somewhere in the Choshen. They're not part of the Choshen because the Urim V'Tumim we did not have Bizman Bayesheni. I think we learned that in Soita, and yet you have to have the Shmoinim Begadim. If you're going to be Mechuser, Begadim if you're not going to wear the Choshen and the Ephod. So it was a detail that was in it. Where did it come from? It doesn't say anywhere in the Chumash what it is, who wrote it. There are some Rishonim that hold that Moshe Rabbeinu came down with the Urim V'Tumim when he came down with the Luchos. Ad kedei kach. It's not made by human beings. Wow. Now there are many other shitas exactly what they were, including that part of the Choshen, which makes it very difficult to understand how can you say the Urim V'Tumim were concealed when if it's part of the Choshen, or if it's the stones of the Choshen, we certainly did have it Bizman Bayesheni, it just means that it didn't work, as we'll see more in Amud Beis. Then the question is, if it's inserted in the Choshen, or if it is the part of the Choshen somehow, was it allowed to be taken away from the Beis HaMikdash? That's a topic that we just learned a few days ago. And many will hold that yes, that it went out to battle. And during battle, we see many times in Tanach, David consulting the Urim V'Tumim in battle, and he needed an urgent answer. So some people say that he sent a shliach to the Mishkan, which is a big doichik, which must mean that the Begadim were not on the level of Big Day Kahuna Gedoyla, they were never used in Avodah, and therefore the prohibition of not wearing it out doesn't go over here, you're going to have to find for it that way. And it was there just in case we needed to consult the Urim V'Tumim. And if the one available was the Kohen Meshuach Melchama, he would wear it then, and they would consult him, and that's exactly what Rabbi Yechanan says. And Itmar Nami, and Itmar Nukoda, Tanya Nami Hachi, that Begadim Shekohen Gadol Mishamish Bohen, clear. Meshuach Melchama, those are the same Begadim that he has to wear when and if Nishal Bohen, if he's the one being consulted. Now really the wordings is the Urim V'Tumim is being consulted. But there has to be the one that's directly looking to the Urim V'Tumim, as we'll see in Amud Beis. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Now let's begin. How does it work? Keitzat shoyalin. How was the consultation made? So says the Braisa. Hashoyel panav klapi nishal. Hashoyel is the one asking the question. Now, it could have been the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama asking the question. Just to make that clear, to the Kohen Gadol. It can be the Melech asking the question. It can be the Av Beis Din asking the question. Or someone asking on their behalf, as we learned in the Mishnah. So the Shoyel is the one asking. And the Nishal is the one wearing the Shmoyne Begadim, the one wearing the Urim V'Tumim. And according to Rashi, they face each other. Rambam has a complete different understanding of this. But let's read inside the Rashi. That Hashoyel Klape Nishal, look inside the Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom. Hashoyel is the Melech, or the Av Beis Din, the one asking. Panav Klape Nishal Klape Koyin, and Vahanishal, which is the Kohen Gadol, or like we just learned, even the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama, Panav Klape Shechina. Panav Klape Shechina means, says Rashi 3 lines from the bottom, his face would be looking down because he would be facing the Urim V'Tumim. V'shem ha'mafayra shebetoich ha'choshim. By the way, even you can be medayik in Rashi that the Shem ha'mafayrish is not the Urim V'Tumim. It's the Urim V'Tumim v'shem ha'mafayrish. So holds Rashi. Rambam, just that we learn Rambam holds that this was ideally done when they were in the oil moed. The Kohen Gadol would face the Shechina, means he would face west. He would face the Makim Ha'arim. And the Shoyel would stand behind him, facing the back of the Kohen Gadol. The opposite of Rashi. Rashi is medayik that it was panim al panim. Elamah, the Shoyel looked at the face of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol's face was pointing down. Number 1, back in the Brais. Hashoyel oimer, this is an example of what exactly they would ask. They would ask, and this is a pasuk regarding David HaMelech, quoting from David. David asked, Erdoiv achrei agdud hazeh, should I pursue this troop? The Hanishal oimer, we'll see soon exactly how the Nishal knows the answer, but he responds, Koyom Hashem, alei v'hatzlach, go on and triumph, you'll be successful. Rabbi Yehuda oimer, ein tzarech loimer Koyom Hashem. It's given, it's clear that this is all coming from God. Elo alei v'hatzlach. Another din, ein shoyalam b'koil. You cannot ask in a loud voice. Why? Because it says v'sha aloi, inquire of him to the exclusion of all the other people. That means the other people should not hear. But on the other hand, you can't ask in your heart. You have to verbalize your ask. And shenemer, as it says, v'shoyaloi lifnei Hashem. Now these words don't prove anything, but Rashi says that later it says, al piv yetzu, based on the answer they should go out to war or not, and al pi drush, the al piv goes on before, that v'shoyaloi lifnei Hashem al piv. Okay. She was speaking in her heart, which means, at least the way we teach and we paskin, we Ashkenazim, she prayed in a whisper. So you whisper the question to the Kohen Gadol. Another detail. You do not ask 2 questions at the same time. You can ask 20 questions, but ask 1 question, get a response. Only after you have the response do you ask the other question. Ve'im shoal, and if you do ask even only 2 questions before you got the response to the first, God Almighty, through the Urim V'Tumim, through the Kohen Gadol, will only answer 1 of the 2, and ve'ein machzirun lo elo rishon. Right, this concept of Chacham only responds rishon. So the answer will be for the first question. Now we're going to bring a proof, which will be a contradiction. Shenemar, as it says, this is when David, while he was fleeing Shaul HaMelech, he wanted to know whether he should go into a neighborhood called Ke'ilah, and he had 2 questions, really. If Shaul B'chlal is not going to go into Ke'ilah, that's the best place to escape to. Even if Shaul will end up going to that village, will the people of Ke'ilah deliver David to the hands of Shaul? And he asked the Urim V'Tumim. And he asked 2 questions together. And he asked it, but in the opposite order. He asked, Hayasagiruni ba'alei Ke'ilah b'yodei? Will the people of Ke'ilah deliver me to the hands of Shaul? B'chlal hayeret Shaul, will Shaul b'chlal go to Ke'ilah, etc.? And Vayomer Hashem, and God tells David, Yeret Shaul will descend. So he asked 2 questions, will they deliver me, will Shaul descend? God only responded 1. Why? Because he should have asked only one, waited for the answer before he asked the other. The problem is that here God answered the second question. The Baraisa said two dinim, that don't ask two questions together, and if you do, God will answer the first. And God responded the second. So the Gemara answers that, normally God will only answer the first question. David, Sha'al, Daf Ayin Gimel Amid Beis, Shaloi Keseder. He asked it out of order, like Rashi says. The first thing he should have asked is Hayedet Shaul. Makes sense, because if Shaul is not going there, then B'chlal there's nothing to be worried about. And then he should have asked Hayas Giruni, whether the people of Keilah will deliver me. So since he asked out of order, God responded to what should have been the first question. Now,
How did God answer through Urim Betumim? Directly?
We'll see in a moment. We're going to see Mamash in a couple of lines. The Kivan Shiyada Shashol Shalek Seder. When God answered the second question, David realized, I asked out of order. And he knew there's only one answer. So Chazar V'Shol Keseder. And that's why it says Vaiter that he asked again. Hayas Giru Ba'ale Ki'ira Oisi Ve'es Anosha B'Yat Shol. Will they deliver me? And then God responded, yes, they will. And therefore, David HaMelech went to a different place. Now, there's an exception. There are times that when you are at battle, in life is a battle. Every second counts, literally. In those rare scenarios, you got to ask both questions together. And there was a story for that. In other words, it's so urgent. The response, the knowledge has to be immediate. Then you can ask two questions and God will answer both. Again, all this is in Shol, that Vayishal David Bashem, he asked God, meaning he asked the Urim V'Tumim. What happened is that a group of Amolekim raided the camp of Eden, and they took captives. Now when you chase raiders, every second counted. And the question is, listen, obviously we want to succeed, but God forbid if you chase raiders and you fail. So not only did you not redeem the captives, but you lost more soldiers. And we had access to the Urim V'Tumim. So he asked, should I chase them? Ha'erdoif? And they asked the second question, Ha'asi genu? Will I overtake them? In a good way, will I win over them? Two questions. And Vayomer loy, and God responded right away both together, the Urim V'Tumim. Redoif? Ki hasek tasek, and v'hatzel tatzel. Another detail. When a Navi gives a Gzeira, even though if it's L'toiva, says the Rambam, it will never change. And if it changes, it's a Raya that's a Navi Sheker. Because the Iker function of a Navi is to predict the future. So he's tested to see if he predicts the future. Other peoples have means of knowing the future, never in the precision of a Navi. But the Rambam adds, but if the Navi speaks about some not positive thing happening, because of not good behavior, if the people do tshuva, l'toivet could be overturned. That's the chayzeres. But gezeres urim v'tumim never will be withdrawn. Einer chayzeres, it's always going to come into fruition. Shenemer, as it says, it's amazing. Here I'm quoting a pasuk in Pinchas, and the Torah calls the requesting of the consulting with the urim v'tumim b'mishpat ha'umrim. Mishpat means a judgment, and chevra, judgments cannot be revised. And that's not for right now, but we know all of these dinim. To the point that many times when judges make a mistake, since they cannot revise the judgment, the judge out of pocket has to compensate the party whom the judge found guilty, who's not. Big achrayas on a judge. A judgment means it's definite. That's why the Torah calls it b'mishpat urim. Another question, lama nikra sheman urim v'tumim? Says the Braisa, urim is from the word oir. Shemeirim es divrayim. They enlighten their words, and tumim miloshan tam tamimus shemashlimim as divreim. Shemashlimim means, like we just mentioned, their predictions always come true. It's full, whatever it says will come all the way to the end. It's going to become a davar shalim. It won't be just words. It's going to be words, and so shall it be. This terrible tragedy that there was a Pelegish, someone's concubine, that she stayed overnight in the region of Binyamin, and there were a few horrible people that raped her to death. And when the other tribes found out about it, What they initially wanted is that Shevet Binyamin should give over to them those perpetrators. And the Binyaminites says, no, we'll judge them, we're not going to give them to you. And we waged war against our brother Binyamin. And it was horrible. And we consulted the Urim V'Tumim. Problem was is that we consulted once. The answer was to go wage war. We waged war and the Bnei Yisrael got terribly hurt. We asked again and again we lost the battle to the cost of many soldiers. It's only after we asked for the third time did we then succeed, but the whole thing is true. This is a Melchames Achim. This was a civil war because we killed so many Binyaminites that there were only 300 men left from the whole Shevet Binyamin. Terrible. And that happens in the Bisman in the first before the first temple was built even. Okay, so l'chayra over there in Givas Binyamin mipnei ma lo hishlimu l'chayram, it did not come to the prediction did not come true. So the Gemara says yes it did because it answers your question. Heim lo bichanu, when we asked Hashem, we didn't ask whether we'll succeed in the battle. We didn't say clearly im linatseach, whether we will win, or im lehi natseach, whether they will win over us, whether we will lose. We never asked that. We only asked whether we should go into battle, and the answer was yes. Okay? When did we clarify our question whether we will win or not? That was only in the third time. And then Taka, when God says you'll win, that's Taka when we won. We asked whether we'll win or lose. Then Iskimu. Then God acquiesced, and then it happened. Shneman, as it says, this is regarding the third time in Shoiftim. Upinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron, oimed lefana vayoma mahem leimoir. He stood in front of the Kohen Gadol. He stood in front of the ark. I forget, he was a Kohen Gadol. He stood in front of the ark, and that was facing the Shechina, according to the Rambam. And he asked, Ha'oisiv oid latzis l'mochama im b'nei Binyamin achi. Should I go yet again? This is the third time to wage war against our brother Binyamin. And now he added for the first time the words, Im echadal, or shall I desist? Now what's pshat shall I desist? He never asked that before. Desisting means desisting because I won't succeed, or whether I won't succeed. That's the pshat. And in the prior two times, they never asked, or I should desist, or whether I should not succeed. And when he asked that question, Vayomer Hashem, God responded, Alu, Ki machar, because tomorrow, the third and final time, etnenu biyodecha. It's also important, going me'inyan, that when Hasidim ask a question of the Rebbe, that we should be very specific in what we ask, and as a rule, with exceptions, as a rule, the Rebbe would answer your question. So when people, let's say, had three options, what they should do, where they should live, the Rebbe would circle one of the three. Our exceptions with the Rebbe would write in a fourth. In other words, the answer is to what you asked. If you don't ask, you're not going to get an answer. They never asked whether we're going to win or not. They never were given an answer for that. So don't say it was not successful. God said to go to wage battle, and that was all part of the plan then. Okay, final step in the Braisa. Now, Kevan, that's for you. Keitzas nasis. Exactly, right? How did the Urim V'Tumim respond? So now, wow. Machloikis, whether Rabbi Yechanan and Eish Lakish are arguing, or whether they're saying the same thing. We're going to go with Rashi, that's a machloikis. Machloikis. Rabbi Yechanan says only boiltois. Boiltois means protrude. The letters would protrude. Whether it means, whatever that means, the letters of the answer would come out. Actually, let's read inside the Rashi. Boiltois. Probably 6 or 7 lines from the top of the Amid. Boltois, ha'oisias, the letters protruded kigoin. Right, we just spoke about the question whether we should go up to battle. And God answered, alei v'hatzlach. Alei is ayin lamed hey. Kigoin ayin from the name Shimon. It's even Larashi that, let's go, that the Urim V'Tumim is parchments with Shem Ab v'chulei in the pocket, but it would be underneath the Choshen Mishpat stones that had on them engraved the letter of the Shvatim, plus, as we'll see here in a moment. So you had the name Shimon, right? Connected to the stone, connected to Shimon. So the ayin of Shimon would protrude. The lamed of Levi would protrude. The yud from Yehuda, hey from Yehuda. Loimer alei. But Rashi says, V'chol achas eino zazim imekayma. These three letters would not arrange themselves somehow. Like a hologram, it's called. That didn't happen. It just went out and it stayed in its place. Ella boltas b'mekayma, and v'hu mitzvah from the Kohen Gadol needed to combine it. However, the way Rashi learns, that Rabbi Shlakish argues, that's the word, for who mitzvah, from the Kohen Gadol. He says it was more than that. Not only would the letters protrude, but they also then mitzvahs, they would combine. So when we learned the Mishnah about Chana, that Shikoira, Keshera, that is not Lishitas, Reish Lakish, the way Rashi learns. Because that was something that the Kohen Gadol needed to do, and therefore he could combine it, so to say, in the out of order. If that's the way it worked, we say Dafkat Tzaddik, and as the Gra adds, and by the way, if you make the cheshbon, not only the letter Tzaddik was not there in the names of the Shvatim, but neither was there a Ches, nor was there a Kuf, and others we'll see in a moment. So there's no Tzaddik, there's no Ches, and there's no Kuf. By the way, that's Tzchoik, right? Amazing. So Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, you're right, but we also had other words engraved on the Choshen. And their letters also were used by the Urim V'Tumim to protrude. What was written? Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Ksif Sham. And here you have the Tzaddik, the Ches, and the Kuf. You know where? All in Yitzchak. V'Holoi Ksif Tes. Not in the names of the tribes, nor in Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. So Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, that we also had engraved Shiftei Yeshurun. Yeshurun sometimes is a shame of the Shvatim. Many say that Yeshurun is one of the names of God. God is the Yashar. And they dafka wrote Shiftei Yeshurun to mention God in the Choshen. Shiftei Yeshurun, and now you have in the test from Shiftei. How can you tell me? And this is especially on a Shlakish, that the letters protruded and they combined, which means all the Kohen needed to do was to read that, let's say, that hologram, that word or those words. It says in a Braisa, Kol Kohen she'eina madav b'ruach hakodesh. If a Kohen Gadol is not on a level that he speaks with divine inspiration, nor if he's not on a level where the Shechina is shoyra olav, ein shoyalan boy. You don't even consult him. For example, Sha'al Tzaddik. This is David HaMelech. David HaMelech asked Tzaddik the Kohen Gadol, and he got an answer. But when David HaMelech asked Elyahu, clearly Rashi writes the whole story over there. Right? He did not even respond. And now the problem is that if the letters not only were boltois, but they were mitztarfois, then why do we have to have a Kohen Gadol with Ruach HaKodesh? Then everyone is able to read the word. So the Gemara answers, even according to the sheet of Reish Lakish, it's Sayuye Hava Messiah Bahadayu. In other words, when would the letters protrude? Even according to Rabbi Yochanan and according to Reish Lakish, when would they combine? It has to do with the kedusha of those tablets or of those parchments of the Shem Kodesh. It also had to do with the level of kedusha and of the tzidkis of the Kohen Gadol. So he was part of the way that God responded. And if the Kohen Gadol was unworthy, then they were not boltois and they were not mitztarfois, so then don't ask. Gavaldik. Okay, that answers the question, Kevin, how it worked. And let's quickly move on. The last thing we learned in the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis is that you can't stam ask any question. Ve'ein shayalim ella, if it's for a king, if it's for the Av Beis Din, or at least it's for a communal need. B'nahanamili, Amar Ababohu, the Amar Kra, here again, as we had above, the Mishpat Ha'urim. Again, a pasuk in Pinchas regarding the consulting of the Urim V'Tumim. The Lifnei Elazar HaKohen Yamoid V'Sho'al B'Mishpat Ha'urim. So says the Rababohu, who, right, goes on Melech. And by the way, that pasuk is speaking about Yehoshua, that Yeshua, who was the king, should stand in front of Elazar HaKohen and ask. So the king gets to ask. V'chol b'nei Yisrael, that's standing with him, that goes. V'chol b'nei Yisrael, itoi, that goes to the Meshuach Mulchama, because who is standing with all of the Yidden? The one leading us to battle. When it says in the pasuk V'chol ha'eda, it's referring to the Sanhedrin. Gavaldik. Here clearly you see that the Meshuach Mulchama is the one doing the asking, just to have it clear. And what we learned on Amud Aleph, right, according to Rab Ravin's version of Amar Rabbi Yochanan, that the Urim, that the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama is someone from whom you can ask as well. Both are true. he can be the one asking the Kohen Gadol, or if for whatever reason the Kohen Gadol is not available, then he wears the Shmonim Begadim, whether it is only in the Beis HaMikdash, whether it's even out there in the battlefield, and the question is being asked of him. And with that we say, Hadron Allah, we will return to you, Baloi Kohen Gadol. And now, with God's help, we're starting the final chapter, the 8th chapter of Yoma. Tosfos already points out that the reason why this comes at the end is because we wanna this Masechta was organized on a chronological order, beginning with that which needs to be done for Yom Kippur prior to Yom Kippur. And what is that? That's a Shivas Yomim. So you have to begin with the 7 days of the quarantining. Once you speak about the quarantining of the Kohen Gadol, so then naturally you go through everything else about the Kohen Gadol, which was from the beginning until now. And now we're going to speak about mitzvahs that are biblical, that will always stand. Make it very clear when Mashiach is coming, all the other tzayimos will be transformed to days of celebration. There will be a isur to fast on those days. Unlike Yom Kippur, it's a mitzvah in the Torah, ta'anos nafshei seichem. The Torah stays forever. And as we'll see, the Torah doesn't say eating, the Torah says afflict yourselves, and we'll define what that means. Begins the Mishnah. Yoma Kippurim. Asud, it's prohibited. Ba'achila u'b'shasiyah, that's considered one of the 5, they're together. Number 2, we are prohibited, it's asud b'rechitza, washing oneself. Number 3, b'sicha, anointing oneself. Number 4, b'ne'inas hasandel, tying shoes or wearing leather shoes. And number 5, u'b'tash m'shamita, having what we call marital relations. Now, machlokes rishonim, Tosfos and Rambam. Tosfos here in Yoma will hold that only achila and shasiyah is asur midoraisa. All of the other inuyim are midrabanan. And the explanation for Shitas Tosfos will be the next line in the Mishnah, that there are exceptions to the other ones, that both a king, and Rashi says a king, darkoi ushevachoi lihi oisna. It's important for him to always have a royal, handsome appearance, like it says in Yeshaya Melech b'yafiyoi techazeno einecha. Kala, the halachic definition of a kala, says Rashi, is the first 30 days from when she gets married. Not what we borrow the term and call today a woman that's in her engaged state. That when a man is with his wife for more than 30 days, he already then knows her, and therefore he doesn't look only at her physical appearance. So whether she looks physically beautiful on Yom Kippur or not, he'll see her to be beautiful. But during the first 30 days, he doesn't know her yet, so he doesn't love her. So all he sees is the external physical appearance. And since it's important for a wife to look beautiful in the eyes of her husband, so in the beginning, ein breira, she gets to wash her face. The Rambam holds that even though the Torah did not clarify how we are to afflict ourselves, and masru aliyat chachamim, but when the chachamim said that affliction doesn't only mean not to eat and drink, affliction means not to bathe, not to anoint, not to put on leather shoes, not to have marital relations, this is now a de'oraisa for which you chayiv kares. The unique thing will be is that since the Chachamim were the ones that brought down, that applied the Din D'Oraisa, so the Chachamim made exceptions. But these are exceptions in a Din Torah, which is Gavaldik. So you have like a Din D'Oraisa, what God told Moshe. You have rabbinics, and then you have those few halachas that God gave a Din. It's a Din D'Oraisa, but the Chachamim are the ones that clarify what the Din Torah is. We partner with God in legislating God's rules, not a derabanan. Gavaldik. Back. Another exception. The third. So we have a melech and a kala. There are two, but the commonality is that they get to wash their faces. And the hechoya, a new mother, a mother that just gave birth, and standing on a cold floor is harmful. And really, this is not only a woman who gave birth. Here we go, our gynecologist. But the emes is that we apply the hechoya to any person that's sick or wounded, to which cold is detrimental to their health. Tinoy lasasandal, they can wear leather shoes. And another important, that then the alternative to leather was a piece of shmata. Nowadays that we have all sorts of rubber shoes, all sorts of shoes that are extremely not only comfortable, but when we are focusing here on health of not getting cold, then we make no such exception. We're whatever most people wear your sneakers. Okay, these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Now, Rabbi Eliezer clearly was the one who gave the three exceptions. Melech, Kala, Choyam. The Chachamim who aser, that's the big debate. Is pshat that the Chachamim, they are arguing with all of the three? They're machman on all of the three? Some understand that the Chachamim oisrim only on a Choyam. But he is also moide that Amelech v'Akala yirchatzu espenem. Bottom line is, we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, which is an anomaly, right? Rabbi Eliezer shamutihi, and we are mated by all the three. Now, when it comes to the first of the five inuyim, eating, how do we define eating? And here, there's something very important. When Hashem says, "Thou shalt not eat," shiurim are halacha l'Moshe Sinai. God told Moshe that eating means a kazayis. Being that God never said, "Don't eat on Yom Kippur," how do we know we're not allowed to eat and drink? Is because God said, "Afflict yourself." Even if a person will eat a kazayis, they will still be in a state of affliction. They won't have yishuv hadas. There won't be umiyasva daite. You need to have more than a kazayis for you to leave the state of inui. Indeed, says the Mishnah, that when as a person, God forbid, going to be chayiv kares, it's only ha'oichel kikoiseves hagasa. It's only if you eat the amount of a large date, which is larger than a kazayis. And how much of it? It's equivalent, the amount of food equivalent, not only to a large date, but to a large date with its pit. We'll speak in the next shiurim, bottom line, what that means in ounces v'chuli. But let's get familiarized with the words of the Mishnah. We don't say kazayis because God didn't say the word eating. It's about being afflicted, and only when you eat that amount or more do you leave your state of inui. And when it comes to drinking, maloi lugma of a cheekful, only then are you chayiv. Weiter, the last din in the Mishnah, koloi cholam mitzarfen l'likar keseves. All foods, if a person has half of a keseves hagasa of meat and the other half of potatoes, then the person ate a keseves hagasa. Or people just say koiseves, even though it means a large date. Which is be mekatzed. And they'll be chayiv kares. V'chol hamashkin mitztarfen. But ha'oichel v'hashoiseh ein mitztarfen. If you have a half of the koiseves, you have a half of malay lugmav, they do not combine. Now there's many chidushim here. Again, going back to the nakuda, which is that really the isur is about remaining in a state of affliction. One might have thought that if I'm going to eat a half of koiseves of meat and the other half of potatoes, even though I ate a sum total of a koiseves, I won't have the miyasva daito. I won't have my, I'm going to be troubled that I'm hungry. No, if you have a total amount of a koiseves, then you left your state of inui. Okay, I know we're behind, but instead of running, let's stop over here. And the huge sugya of chatzi shiur, asur min ha-Torah, mutar min ha-Torah, God willing, will come up in tomorrow's class.
Yeah.